It is not a lack of resources that we try to spend on these things. Perhaps it is that the policies for how those resources are allocated, whether it is in education or anything else, is so heavily corrupted by special interests that we are simply being stolen from. It's Tuesday. I am Dylan Ratigan. It's nice to see you. It's a big day here, and it's a big opportunity for all of us. You've been hearing about it for weeks, and finally we are now moments away from unveiling not only the text for the draft of a constitutional amendment to get the money out of politics so we can stop spending so much on everything from education to health care and getting so little, but a petition to organize all of us so that we can then become an unrelenting, overwhelming force for our politicians. Until it changes, we'll never be able to start correcting the real problems facing our nation. Most money spent in the world on health care? Atrocious health. Most money spent in the world subsidizing a banking system? No investment in lending, a foreclosure crisis, unemployment, and 15% poverty. Spend the most in the world on energy? Most inefficient, most energy wasteful nation on the planet. Us. The list goes on and on. Quite simply, money has bought our politics, and what is getting spent is going to greedy bastards, not us. And only we can take it back. So now, our goal is to transform all that mad as hell anger from this summer, mine, yours, everybody else's, into positive change that begins this fall. And here for the unveiling of the petition and the amendment is our Washington insider, Jimmy Williams, a former lobbyist who, in consultation with a series of constitutional scholars, penned the text, and Mark McKinnon, Republican strategist and co-founder of No Labels, an organization with a direct agenda to try to drive issues-based debate around healthcare, around energy. And surely, Mark, you run into the barrier that is money. Give us a sense of how hard it is for you to engage in any debate that you might actually want to have against the girded steel of bought parties on both sides.
Well, more power to you, Dylan and Jimmy, for taking this on. It's so important. I've been working on this issue for years. Let me tell you a quick story. 30 years ago in Texas, I worked for a governor. After he was elected, typically he hired his campaign manager as the appointments chief, which is a very plum job. He got to appoint all the people to high offices. He was meeting with his counterpart from Wisconsin, which has very strict campaign finance laws, and the guy from Wisconsin told him that they capped their contributions at $500. The guy from Texas could not believe it, sat there for a minute, looked at him, and then seriously said, well, then how do you know who to appoint? And that was 30 years ago, Dylan, and it hasn't changed. And so I see things now like Citizens United, and I see the amount of money going to these super PACs. Here's another just jaw-dropping notion. The candidates for president get $100 million if they agree to public financing. Nobody agrees to it anymore because there's not enough money. This is absurd. It's pornographic. Yeah. It's out of control. And, Jimmy, I'm so glad you're doing this amendment. It's needed because we know that Congress won't reform itself, and the only way to do it is to go around them.
And the only way to go around them is to have a well-organized, very large group, maybe not with the same ideas, maybe not with the same mechanics, but with the same principle. The same core principle that we must get money out so that we can all return to the spirited debate we seek on the issues that are critical to our nation. With no further ado, Jimmy, give us the setup for the philosophy that you used in drafting this and in your consultation with constitutional scholars, and then we'll get into the amendment. What's the logic?
Well, first and foremost, every single time Congress has tried to clean up the system, to get money out of politics, or at least to limit the number of the amount you can give to them in their campaigns. The Supreme Court of the United States has struck this down. And they've done it simply because of one reason. The court has interpreted that under the First Amendment, money is speech. And since speech is protected under the First Amendment to the Constitution, nothing that the Congress can do can stop that.
Can intervene.
That's exactly right.
That's been the barrier.
So that's the basis of what our problem is. So how do you do it? Do you say that a $25 donation is speech? Or do you say a $250 million donation to a super PAC is speech?
So you say the only way to solve it is money isn't speech?
All money is speech under the Supreme Court of the United States interpretation of the Constitution. So you either ban it or you don't. It's just that simple.
I want to go to the amendment itself. It is simply 3 sentences. I want to read the whole thing once, and then I want to go back to each sentence.
Sure.
Is that reasonable?
Yes.
Do we have a graphic that that folks can read along at home with this? It says, no person, corporation, or business entity of any type, domestic or foreign, shall be allowed to contribute money directly or indirectly to any candidate for federal office or to contribute on behalf of or opposed to any type of campaign for federal office. You go on to say, notwithstanding any other provision of the law, campaign contributions to candidates for federal office shall not constitute speech of any kind as guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution or any amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The last sentence, Congress shall set forth a federal holiday for the purpose of voting for candidates for federal office. First off, before we get into the analysis, Mark, what is your first response to the general framing and language in that draft?
Well, I love it. It's really bold, Dylan, and what Jimmy's done is really taken a full slate on this. I mean, people have tried to take different cuts at it, but they've always kind of stopped short of pulling the full Monty here, and that's what I think is both bold and really in many ways brilliant about it, because that really is the only way. And what would surprise a lot of people is how many people would actually agree with this approach, because candidates hate raising the money, the donors hate being hit up for the money, the system is awash in the money, and I can tell you, as the greedy bastard who used to spend the money on the advertising on a campaign, 90% of it is wasted. We don't need it.
Those darn greedy. The problem, Mark, is that we're all greedy bastards depending on the day and time and the system that we put ourselves in. And at the end of the day, a system with money in politics brings out the inner greedy bastard in everybody. I want to look at the individual sentences quickly, and then I want to go. We have a bunch of feedback for both of you from the social media universe. This was originally posted on the internet a few hours ago, so we had some questions. But sentence number 1, Jimmy, no person, corporation, or business entity of any type, domestic or foreign, shall be allowed to contribute money directly or indirectly to any candidate for federal office or to contribute money on behalf of or opposed to any type of campaign for federal office. 2 questions. Why the decision, instead of saying you can't give money, you say you can't take money? Why'd you make the decision to say I'm not going to, it's like the NCAA, the players can't take money. You can try to give money to the players all you want, but if you're going to play college sports, you can't take money. If you're going to be a federal politician, you can't take money. It's sort of the NCAA model, if you will, in the framing of this, and also why the additional language where it says contributors on behalf of or opposed to any type of campaign for federal office.
Well, let's start with the second part, the second clause of the sentence, and go and work backwards. It's a majority of the money in politics, as we saw in the 2010 cycle, and as we have been seeing increasingly over these cycles, is not what you raise for your actual campaign coffers and then spend on TV. It's what somebody else raises for your campaign coffer, or for your candidacy or against your candidacy. When the Supreme Court,
is that the super PAC?
That's it's super PAC. It's any kind of independent expenditure.
So the super PAC is addressed in this first sentence.
It is addressed in the second part of the first sentence, because you are not allowed to raise money or spend money on a behalf
why catching money as opposed to giving money? Why the NCAA structure, if you will?
Well, the point being is that, listen, it's simple. I don't want the burden of this to be necessarily on individuals or their rights.
I want the burden. Catching Mark McKinnon or catching whoever it is, Dylan Ratigan, giving money. It's not about a citizen giving money. It's about a politician taking it.
I don't think that politicians by nature are corrupt. I don't think lobbyists by nature are corrupt. I don't think fundraisers by nature are corrupt. Every one of those entities is operating within a system that they only know. If you just take it all out, then every single one of those groups of people can do their job. Members of Congress won't have to fundraise. Lobbyists won't have to raise money. Fundraisers can just go out and either become lobbyists or they can help run campaigns or whatever.
You agree? What do you think about what you're hearing, Mark?
I like it. The question I wanted to ask, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead.
No, please do.
I'm familiar with the public financing ideas and have pushed them for a long time. This is the first time I've heard it extended to the whole notion of banning individual corporations as well, and I like it. The question is, if that's the case, and I know there are different funding mechanisms that we might look to, but how do you determine who gets to qualify for that? And if, I mean, how do you keep everybody from qualifying if it's a public funding mechanism like that, or do you have some kind of match?
And we got a lot of that, by the way, from the social media universe and Twitter and all the rest of it, which is, okay, this is great, you've banned the money, you've got the money out, but how do you plan on actually financing elections, and what's the mechanism, and who's going to solve that problem?
How one qualifies to run for federal office is state law. Has nothing at all to do with the feds. That's an interesting way of looking at it. It is sort of this sort of bicameral system, if you will. If you want to run for Congress and you're from the Commonwealth of Virginia, you have to go through the machinations that the Commonwealth of Virginia has set out to actually qualify for office.
I get that, but there's a bigger question here, which is, how are you going to finance elections if this amendment passes?
This amendment
and who's going to decide that?
Let me be clear. This amendment does not touch how you finance federal elections going forward. All it does is say you can't contribute money to an election. What do I think happens?
So, Mark, the idea is,
elections.
the idea, I guess, Mark, in this, if I do interpret Jimmy, is we're bleeding. We want a health care debate. We want an energy debate. We want an education debate. We can't get it because there is a green curtain of money around Washington, D.C. that is preventing us from having these debates. Do you think it's appropriate, to Jimmy's point, that we simply make this somebody else's problem? In other words, that we are here to say get the money out, and it is on. There are a lot of smart people that should be able to figure this out. Fair?
I think that's really smart too. Let them solve that part of the problem, but take on the first part of the problem, which is the real issue, and just prohibit the funding by corporations, candidates, PACs, or people.
I hate to use this analogy, but the alcoholic needs to dry out. We got to take the liquor out of the system at this point. For lack of a better analogy, I hate to use it. My father was a drunk. I hate to use it, but it's the truth. Congress is drunk on money.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, and if that's the case, then we may get into a discussion where we should have been for a long time, where we talk about solutions where there's access to public airwaves and those sort of solutions. Which make a lot of sense.
Let us hope that this movement to get money out precipitates a debate that goes to where you're going, Mark. What, if anything, what would be an appropriate thing for me, having sort of put myself in this position quite by my own choice and with great gusto, I might add, but what could No Labels do to help us? And would you be up for signing a petition like this, Mark?
Oh, well, my only problem is that I've called for a pledge not to sign any petitions for anybody.
Fair enough. But I realize that. So I'm curious, though, with No Labels, I would love to talk to you about what we could do with you.
Pledges. Well, we're trying to change the process, and this is a great discussion about how you change the process of how Congress works and how politics works. So I think there's lots of organizations out there. Lawrence Lessig, who's been working on this, just had a constitutional convention. Yeah. I'm in Cambridge right now. It was this weekend and was packed to the walls with people. So there's all kinds of organizations out here. I think when you pierce this, as you're doing right now, that you're going to find I think you're going to see an eruption, a volcanic wave of support headed your way. Well, and I'm glad to do all I can from my end.
You know, and we appreciate that, and appreciate your efforts and your contributions to catalyze the focus of this conversation. Jimmy sticks around with the mega panel. We let Mark go. There has been an overwhelming response, as you might imagine, to our conversation about getting money out of politics this fine day. So much so that the petition site has been repeatedly taken down, but last I heard was back online. Bear in mind, it will be back up quickly if it is not working when you go. If you go to getmoneyout.com, you can add your name and join the campaign to get money out of politics. It is only our unrelenting nature, our persistence, that will not only make this petition what it could be, but will make the agenda that underlies this petition a reality. If you don't want to go to the web or if the website's not working, you can text as well your signature to the number on your screen, 917-720-6888. We're back with Jimmy in the mega panel after this. It's away from unveiling not only the text for the draft of a constitutional amendment to get the money out of politics so we can stop spending so much on everything from education to health care and getting so little, but a petition to organize all of us so that we can then become an unrelenting, overwhelming force for our politicians. Until it changes, we'll never be able to start correcting the real problems facing our nation. Most money spent in the world on health care? Atrocious health. Most money spent in the world subsidizing a banking system? No investment in lending, a foreclosure crisis, unemployment, and 15% poverty. Spend the most in the world on energy? Most inefficient, most energy wasteful nation on the planet? Us. The list goes on and on. Quite simply, money has bought our politics, and what is getting spent is going to greedy bastards, not us. And only it is not a lack of resources that we try to spend on these things. Perhaps it is that the policies for how those resources are allocated, whether it is in education or anything else, is so heavily corrupted by special interests that we are simply being stolen from. It's Tuesday. I am Dylan Ratigan. It's nice to see you. It's a big day here, and it's a big opportunity for all of us. You've been hearing about it for weeks, and finally, we are now moments we can take it back. So now, our goal is to transform all that mad as hell anger from this summer, mine, yours, everybody else's, into positive change that begins this fall. And here for the unveiling of the petition and the amendment is our Washington insider, Jimmy Williams, a former lobbyist who, in consultation with a series of constitutional scholars, penned the text, and Mark McKinnon, Republican strategist and co-founder of No Labels, an organization with a direct agenda to try to drive issues-based debate around healthcare, around energy. And surely, Mark, you run into the barrier that is money. Give us a sense of how hard it is for you to engage in any debate that you might actually want to have against the girded steel of bought parties on both sides.
Well, more power to you, Dylan and Jimmy, for taking this on. It's so important. I've been working on this issue for years. Let me tell you a quick story.